Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. This is Pastor's Point of View number 340. Today is February the 7th. We're releasing this, on February the 7th, 2025. And as you can see from our preview slide, we've got a prophecy update for you today. Trying to look at, in this particular session, three major issues. Breaking news to report to you concerning the announcement that everybody's talking about at the time of this recording, Donald Trump wanting the United States to take ownership over the Gaza Strip. We'll bring you up to speed on what the restraining of evil, something that God said he would do until the Antichrist comes. We'll bring you up to speed on that. And then we've got some developments related to Mark of the Beast technology that we'll be reporting to you as well. So let's go ahead and start with the breaking news. Here is our first, major slide, and this one is from Fox News, and it says President Trump says the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip and rebuild it to stabilize the Middle East. And he's talking about this being, the next French Riviera. He's talking about the inhabitants of Gaza, leaving the Gaza Strip and, being absorbed into the surrounding Middle Eastern countries like Jordan, Egypt, etc. At the time of this recording, this is the major subject of the news cycle, and people are basically asking us, this is a major U-turn in Trump's foreign policy, because he campaigned on withdrawing, more of an isolationist model, not getting into the business that George W. Bush got into, where he started to sort of arguably nation build, particularly in the Middle East. Trump campaigned against that, and now it looks like he's doing that in the Gaza Strip with this latest announcement. And so the question is, what does all of this mean prophetically? You can put your political hat on to analyze this, but I'm not going to do that here. I have my own political ideology that I could use to screen this, but I'm just going to talk about this from a prophetic Bible prophecy angle in this session. And notice this particular map here. First of all, what are we talking about? When we talk about the Gaza Strip, what do we mean? It's that dark brown area in the southwestern portion, of the map of Israel. It's an area that the Israelis relinquished to the inhabitants of Gaza in 2004. And once it was relinquished, they had one and only one election. They elected Hamas in 2005, and ever since then, it's been used as a beachhead for terrorist activity into the land of Israel, culminating in the events of October the 7th of 2023, where Hamas used it as a beachhead to inflict upon the Israelis what per capita basis is the equivalent of our 9/11 in the United States of America, if not worse. And so the Israelis went in there and declared war and went in and started to very successfully root out the presence of Hamas in Gaza. And so that's kind of the state of affairs from October the 7th, 2023 right to the present. And then all of a sudden Donald Trump just took the microphone a night or two ago and said the United States wants to come in and usurp ownership over that Gaza Strip. And what does it mean prophetically? Well, here's my basic analysis of how this all fits into Bible prophecy. Notice Ezekiel 38, and notice, if you will, verse 12. It's a description of the attackers that will invade Israel in the last days, Ezekiel 38 and 39, spearheaded by Russia, Iran, and Turkey. So this is a war that is yet future prophetically from our time standpoint. And Ezekiel 38 and verse 12 gives the motives of these attackers. It says they will come to capture spoil. and to seize plunder, to turn your hand against the waste places which are now inhabited, against the people who are gathered from the nations, who have acquired cattle and goods, and who live at the center of the world. And notice the next verse, Ezekiel 38 and verse 13. It says, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all its villages will say to you, have you come to capture spoil? Have you assembled your company to seize plunder, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, and to capture great spoil? So it's very clear from these verses that the motive of these attackers in the end time scenario, they will invade Israel because of Israel's wealth. And obviously a prophecy like that can't materialize unless Israel becomes wealthy. And so what I'm seeing is this potential United States ownership, and a lot of the details haven't really been fleshed out, but if this plan comes to fruition, then I think it will contribute to Israel's wealth magnificently. And as it contributes to Israel's wealth magnificently, it sets the stage for the covetous motivation of the attackers in the last days. So one of the things that is not really being brought up in this whole discussion is something here that you can see from this Times of Israel article. This is from last year, and the title of it is the Ben Gurion Canal, A Vision Amidst Upheaval. By an individual or a blogger whose name is Pezzulli, February the 26th, 2024, and he's describing a canal called the Ben Gurion Canal, named after one of Israel's, if not modern Israel's most prominent founding father, Ben Gurion. And he describes this canal, which is supposed to connect, essentially, you can see it from the map there, the Red Sea, and it's supposed to go all the way to Ashkelon, which is right next door to Gaza, the Gaza Strip. And in fact, if you Google this and watch some videos online, a lot of the presentations will say it's not going to end this canal next door to Gaza. It's going to actually end in the midst of Gaza. So obviously a canal project can't work if you have Hamas either next door to the end of the canal project, or the canal project ends in a strip, the Gaza Strip, controlled by Hamas. So this may be the motivation as to why Donald Trump wants to come in and assert a United States presence there, to see this canal project completed. And as that canal project is completed, as I'll explain in just a moment, it's a way around the Suez Canal, which will weaken Egypt and enhance Israel's wealth. And as Israel's wealth, and of course part of that wealth would be for the United States, because Donald Trump at the end of the day is a nationalist and wants to do what's in the best interest of the United States of America. As this enhances America's wealth and as this enhances Israel's wealth, suddenly the wealth is in place to a greater extent, more than what currently exists, to precipitate the invasion of Russia, Turkey, and Iran in the last days. Let me read to you just a little bit, if I could, from this blog piece describing this Ben Gurion Canal. It says, of the Ben Gurion Canal, a vision revived. Named in homage to Israel's founder, the Ben Gurion Canal Project envisioned a monumental waterway connecting Eilat on the Red Sea to Ashkelon on the Mediterranean Sea, charting a course through the rugged terrain straddling Israel and Jordan. Its proponents envisioned a route that would circumvent traditional bottlenecks and alleviate the congestion plaguing the Suez Canal. Now, if you look at that map there, you can see the Suez Canal there next to the Sinai Peninsula, next to Egypt. And so this new canal essentially would allow the nations of the world to circumvent the Suez Canal and take their goods through the Ben Gurion Canal, which enhances Israel. And as it enhances Israel and Israel becomes wealthy, you can see why Trump would want for the United States of America, a nationalist, a piece of the pie, so to speak. This particular article goes on, and after talking about this alleviation of bottlenecks, it says this bold infrastructure endeavor held the promise of reshaping global trade patterns and reducing reliance on existing maritime routes. The article also says the Ben Gurion Canal would have a world-scale impact. The redundancy of waterways would put an end to the congestion of the Suez Canal. So if this project goes through, and if the United States, is going to assert itself in terms of owning or playing a significant role in cleaning out the Gaza Strip, lurking behind the scenes is this Ben Gurion Canal, which they've always wanted, which will increase Israel's wealth, whose ending point is either near Gaza or inside of Gaza. And that could be the motivation for Trump wanting to do what he wants to do. And if that analysis holds true, as I said before, it will increase the wealth of Israel, which will further set the stage for the Gog-Magog invasion. Israel is already becoming wealthy. We have oil in Zion. We have natural gas discoveries off the northern coast of Israel in the Mediterranean Sea. We have other things in play, like the mineral deposits that are found within the Dead Sea. And I think what is happening with all of these things is they're all coming together in concert. They're all coming together in confluence. Israel has not just been regathered from the nations like God said she would in the last days, but she's becoming wealthy, which is setting the stage for the coming Gog-Magog invasion, albeit Ezekiel 38, verse 12 and verse 13, as we mentioned earlier. And there's something else in play. Notice Zechariah chapter 12. And notice, if you will, verse 3. It says, "It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured. And all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it." And notice also, if you will, Zechariah 14, and notice, if you will, verse 2. God, through the prophet Ezekiel, predicts, "For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city." Not only does this Ben Gurion Canal sort of explain this alleged U-turn in Trump's foreign policy, where he didn't want to do nation building, now all of a sudden he's interested in nation building, but it also may explain why there is going to be a worldwide hatred against Israel in the last days. It's important to understand that the nations of the earth don't want this canal project to go through, and they don't want the Trump plan to go through either. And as the Trump plan comes into motion and the nations of the earth are against it, that may help explain this great worldwide hatred against the Jews in the last days. For example, notice this particular article from the Times of Israel. This is February the 5th, 2025. It says, "European ministers come out against Trump's Gaza plan. They say this is unacceptable under international law." Foreign ministers from a number of European countries came out against U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to take over Gaza and relocate its entire population. The German foreign minister says, "No, let's go back to the two-state solution model as a way to solve tension in the Middle East." The article talks about the leadership of France says, "No, let's go back to the two-state solution model." The British foreign minister says at a news conference during a certain trip to Kyiv, "We've always been clear in our belief that we must see the two states." Spanish foreign minister says the same thing, quote, "Gaza is part of the future Palestinian state." Spain supports and has to coexist, guaranteeing the Israeli state's prosperity and safety, he adds. So the nations of the earth don't like this because they're hooked into the two-state solution as a way to resolve tension in the Middle East, meaning take Judea and Samaria, sometimes called the West Bank, and give it to the Palestinians. And Trump is saying that's perhaps not the way to solve tension in the Middle East. This Gaza takeover plan is the way to do it. So if Trump goes through with this, and he very well could, the nations of the earth are going to hate it because they've already bought into the two-state solution model. And so that explains Europe's hatred for the nation of Israel in the last days, something that the prophet Zechariah predicted when he talked about worldwide hatred for the Jewish nation. And it's not just the European nations that are opposed to the Trump plan. We also see that 5 Arab nations have overtly rejected it. Notice again another article from the Times of Israel, February the 4th, 2025. It says, in letter to the United States, 5 Arab nations reject a transfer of Gazans and urge a two-state solution. In other words, these surrounding Arabic Middle Eastern countries, whether they're Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, etc., says, Trump and company can go into Gaza and displace the Gazans and send them somewhere else, but we as the surrounding countries will not receive or absorb those people. So not only are the European nations opposed to the plan, but the Arabic nations are opposed to the plan as well. The article says 5 Arab foreign ministers and a senior Palestinian official sent a joint letter to the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Monday, urging the Trump administration to back a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and rejecting recent suggestions by U.S. President Donald Trump that residents of the Gaza Strip be resettled, either temporarily or permanently, elsewhere in the Middle East. Palestinians do not want to leave their land. We support their position unequivocally, wrote foreign ministers of Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, as well as the Palestinian Authority leadership. The article says 5 foreign Arab ministers and a senior Palestinian official sent a joint letter to the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Monday, urging the Trump administration to back a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and rejecting recent suggestions by U.S. President Donald Trump that residents of the Gaza Strip be resettled either temporarily or permanently or elsewhere in the Middle East. The diplomats urged the U.S. to oppose any unilateral measures that undermine the viability of the two-state solution. It is imperative that Israel does not annex any part of Palestinian land. So the European nations don't like the Trump plan. The Arabic nations don't like the Trump plan. There's a reason why the Arabic nations don't like the Trump plan. They've been using the so-called Palestinians as propaganda tools for an awful long time. The Arabic nations and the nations of the earth, all of them, quite frankly, want you to believe that Israel came into that land in 1948 and displaced a thriving civilization that was already there called the Palestinians. And so they want to keep these people in sort of a displaced, unhappy state, not allowing them to reassimilate into the surrounding Arabic nations because they want to point to them as propaganda tools that, look, these are the people that the Israelis displaced. So that propaganda tool disappears if the Trump plan works and the United States plays a role in ownership of Gaza, and all of these inhabitants of Gaza go back into the surrounding Arabic nations. The propaganda tool disappears, and that's another reason why the Arabic nations are opposed to this plan. But think about this for a minute. If this plan were to go through, think of the hatred that the nation of Israel would incur, not just from Europe, but from other Middle Eastern countries. And as that hatred, which already is in existence, sort of like a cauldron, is boiling over, that sets the stage very nicely, not only for the Ezekiel 38 and 39 invasion, but for what Zechariah predicted: all the nations of the earth will hate Israel in the last days. So we've gotten a lot of emails wanting our perspective on how this latest announcement by Donald Trump fits into Bible prophecy. From my perspective, those are the two ways it fits in. It makes Israel wealthy, which sets the stage for Ezekiel 38, verses 12 and 13, and it makes the nations of the earth hate Israel, which sets the stage for Zechariah 12, verse 3, and Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 2. And we'll just have to see how this whole thing plays out. Is this plan going to become a reality or not? I don't have the answer to that. Only time will tell. What I'm saying is, if it does become a reality, and it could become a reality, then it fits exactly into the scenario that God lays out in His Word concerning the end times. With all that being said, let's switch to our second major bullet point here, and let's talk a little bit more about the restrainer. A lot of you have emailed us and contacted us and expressed gratitude for what we said on previous shows related to the restrainer. Let me call your attention, if I could, to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. This is a description of what the Holy Spirit does in the world before the man of lawlessness shows up. The man of lawlessness is coming. The Antichrist is coming. But before he comes, there is something in the earth restraining or inhibiting his appearance in the last days. And so a lot of people, when they look at Bible prophecy, they kind of act like, gee, we're in the tribulation period now. And nothing could be further from the truth. We're seeing the stage set for the tribulation period, no doubt, but we are not yet in the tribulation period because of those verses on the screen. There is something in the world today holding back evil, holding back the man of sin. Paul writes to the Thessalonians, and he says in 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 and 7, "And you know that what restrains him, so that now in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way." So, to have an intellectually honest prophecy update, all of the news can't be related to the bad news of the coming tribulation period. There's also an awful lot of good news if you're going to look at everything God says about Bible prophecy. Because right now, as I speak, evil cannot reach its zenith or climax. Handcuffs are being placed on evil. Sometimes God uses the institution of human government itself to restrain evil. Let's remember what the Apostle Paul said concerning the institution of human government in Romans 13, verses 3 through 5. He says, "For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it," government, "is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it," or government, "does not bear the sword for nothing. For it," government, "is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil." So we have a restrainer in the world, and we also learn from that passage that God can actually use the institution of human government to hold back the forces of the Antichrist. And I believe that that is what God is doing right now through the newly elected and newly inaugurated Trump administration. And let me give you some examples of how evil is being held back right now via the Trump administration. Evil that would be running wild today, unchecked, absent the bold actions of the Trump administration, particularly in the recent executive orders that he has handed down. Notice this article from Christianity Today, January 24th, 2025. It says Trump pardons protesters convicted of blocking abortion clinics. It says on the eve of the March for Life in Washington, which marks the anniversary of Roe versus Wade, the newly inaugurated President Donald Trump pardoned nearly 24 pro-life protesters who were convicted of Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. An acronym for that is FACE, F-A-C-E, violations under the Obama administration. For blocking, the Biden administration. For blocking abortion clinic access, the protesters face sentences of up to 10 years under the charges because the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Department of Justice, took the new approach of adding civil rights conspiracy charges to cases. These are people that were rotting in jail for nothing more than protesting in front of abortion clinics. In one clinic blockade, a protester caused a nurse to sprain her ankle, so they charged her, this particular pro-life protester, with violating the FACE Act. In one clinic blockade, a protester caused a nurse to sprain her ankle, while in others, the protesters did peaceful sit-ins with prayer outside a clinic. One protester was sentenced to 3 years for live streaming a blockade, though he did not enter the clinic. I mean, this is the type of persecution that went on during the Biden regime. Some of those convicted were very old, we would say. Joan Bell, age 76, Jean Marshall, age 74, and Eva Edel, age 89. The passage of the FACE Act in 1994 covers a spectrum of activism around clinics involving any intimidation or interference with providing reproductive health services, which is a code word for abortion. Any climate of intimidation that exists around these abortion clinics, the federal government can throw, the full weight of the federal government at you. And of course, intimidation is very nebulously defined. And that's why all of these pro-life protesters found themselves rotting in jail under the Biden regime. A number of Supreme Court cases today are considering bubble regulations that establish a radius around a clinic that protesters cannot enter. In its January 14th letter petitioning for pardons of the protesters, the Thomas More Society of Attorneys said their clients had been victims of weaponization of the Department of Justice by the Biden administration. While Biden's prosecutors almost entirely ignored the firebombing and vandalism of hundreds of pro-life churches and pregnancy centers, they viciously pursued pro-life Americans, the lawyers wrote. In 2023, the Biden administration filed FACE Act charges against 4 individuals who attacked a pregnancy center, but it had prosecuted more cases against pro-life protesters. Now, Donald Trump comes into office and he called these federal cases persecution. And with the stroke of a pen, he allows all of these pro-life protesters who probably never in their lives have run afoul of the law, he allows them out of prison. Now, I don't know how you interpret that. I interpret that as the restraint of evil. Something that would not have happened had the Biden administration under Kamala Harris won the last election cycle. Notice this from X. This is from Catholic Vote. It says, breaking: Trump officially signs pardons for pro-life activists targeted by the Biden DOJ weaponizing of the FACE Act. And if we could switch the slides to the Catholic Vote slide, that would be very helpful. It says it quotes here Trump saying they should not have been prosecuted. This is ridiculous. So this is just an example of how the Holy Spirit, through the Trump administration, is restraining the forces of evil. The spirit of the Antichrist, even as I speak, is being restrained. And we should look at this and not develop some conspiracy theory that, the Trump administration is really an Antichrist administration and they're really out there trying to fool us. That's not the proper attitude for a Christian at all. It's to rejoice that evil is being held back, something that God specifically said would happen over the course of the last 2,000 years and would continue right up to the eve of the rapture of the church. And we have more examples of this restraint of evil. Notice this particular headline. It says, White House orders pronouns removed from email signatures at agencies. It says employees of at least 2 federal agencies are being instructed by the Trump administration to immediately stop using pronouns in their email signatures, according to memos obtained by multiple media outlets on Friday. One of the memos was sent to the Centers for Disease Control by Jason Bonander, the CDC's chief information officer, according to ABC News and the Tech News website. Another example where the Trump administration is not getting in bed with all of this, insane DEI, political correctness, the transgender agenda. All of that is being now held at bay. All of that is being held back. Notice this particular screenshot also from X, from someone named Patrick Webb. It says, breaking: Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has ordered the Department of Defense to cease recognition of Juneteenth and Pride Month. Notice also that the Trump administration, through these executive orders, is taking a stand against the use of federal money for sex change for minors. Here I'm reading another screenshot, and it says this: President Trump signs no sex changes for minors. And it quotes him as saying, I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth no longer meets federal health and safety standards. They will be terminated from receiving federal funds effective immediately. Here is a screenshot from Truth Social, Trump's social media platform. And he writes this, January 28th, today it was my great honor to sign an executive order banning chemical castration and medical mutilation of innocent children in the United States of America. Our nation will no longer fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support so-called gender-affirming care, which has already ruined far too many precious lives. My order directs agencies to use every available means to cut off federal financial participation in institutions which seek to provide these barbaric medical procedures that should have never been allowed to take place. A lot of the insanity that happened in the Obama years and under the Biden regime has just been handcuffed. It's been stopped. It's been halted. I put all of this in the work of the restrainer using the Trump administration, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. And even as we are recording this, another breaking news item is that President Trump, and here's an article from Breitbart, President Trump signs an executive order to protect women's sports. On Wednesday afternoon, President Trump signed an executive order aimed at protecting women's sports from the incursion of transgender athletes. And didn't we see women at physical risk in the last round of the Olympics because they were forced to fight, in some cases, box, kick, etc., athletes that were not female but were male, because the male athletes were forced into female sports. I mean, the idea that you put men into female sports is absolute insanity. 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 7 is very clear that the female is the weaker vessel. It doesn't mean she's inferior. It doesn't mean that she is not as intelligent as a man. It doesn't mean that she's not an image bearer of God like the man is. It doesn't mean that she's not a joint heir of salvation like the man is. What it means is she is in a more fragile condition as created by God himself. And it's generally true that if you take a male football team and a female football team of the same age, the men are going to win 9 out of the 10 times, because men have been designed by God as physically stronger than women. I understand there's always exceptions to the rule, but I'm speaking in generalities here. And it is true that a woman will be reduced to tears faster than a man because she's more fragile than a man. That's by divine design. And so to take a man who claims to be a woman and put her into a position where she's now competing with this trans is now competing with a woman, a male competing against a female, in other words, puts women in a physically dangerous situation. And that's the type of insanity that was running wild in the last administration and also in the Obama years. And Donald Trump just signed an executive order slowing it down. I mean, he is delaying the decay through these various executive orders. And it continues. Notice this particular article from the Washington Times. It says the FAA turned away qualified air traffic controllers based solely on race. And we're in a situation now in our country where we just had 2 major airplane, helicopter accidents. And we're starting to discover that the reason these accidents occurred is you have people in key positions that shouldn't be there. They're not qualified to be there. In some cases, you have one person trying to do 2 jobs because of DEI. We're not going to hire people if they're of a particular skin color. And so people are rising to a level of influence that have no ability to be there. This is the ripened fruit, so to speak, of all of these DEI policies. It actually puts Americans at risk. And here Donald Trump comes along and he starts to sign executive order after executive order that puts an end to these things. Donald Trump is also taking a stand on national security. Notice this screenshot from X. It says, new President Trump just banned John Bolton, John Brennan, and 47 other former intelligence officials from entering the U.S. government and its facilities due to national security concerns, Reuters reports. They lied in 220 and said that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian information. The deep state is taking blow after blow. So Donald Trump is doing things for the good of the country in terms of its national security, and not based on rewarding his buddies, cronyism, party loyalty. And so these are all very positive things that are happening across our nation thanks to the restraining work of Donald J. Trump. Notice this particular screenshot of a letter. This particular letter was written by the U.S. Department of Justice. and it was written to investigate Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer, for comments that he made that could easily be interpreted as calling for imminent death, destruction on our Supreme Court justices, excuse me. And here's what the letter says, explaining to Schumer exactly why he's being investigated. Schumer says this, and you can find this on YouTube and on videos online. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh. Now, keep in mind that an armed person a few years back showed up at Brett Kavanaugh's residence with all of the military gear to inflict great harm. This is the type of incendiary rhetoric that comes from the left that easily leads to violence. And what the left says, it's actually the right or conservatives involved in hate speech. And now that Donald Trump is in office, we see things being rightly set in order, where those actually espousing the incendiary rhetoric are now being investigated, including Chuck Schumer, by the U.S. Department of Justice. All of these things, to a large extent, are not being reported, but I'm reporting them to you here and now to show you all of the good things that are happening in terms of the restraint of evil. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 and 7. Schumer said, I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. Is that not incendiary rhetoric that could easily inflame people to commit violence? You will pay the price. You have, let's see if I can read this here. You won't know what hits you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Notice this language, hit you. Pay the price. You know, the very things that the left accuses the right of saying, Schumer himself actually said, and now with the right president in place, Schumer, rightfully so, is being investigated for his incendiary rhetoric. Notice also this particular slide here. This is from Richard Grenell. Richard Grenell is Trump's envoy for special missions, and he just went into Venezuela and essentially through some, I would put it this way, speak softly and carry a big stick rhetoric to Venezuelan leadership. You have now 6 hostages that were held in Venezuela, Americans, released from prison and are being flown home here from Venezuela back to the United States of America, as is captured in this picture. Grenell writes here on X, we are wheels up and headed home with 6 Americans. They just spoke to at real Donald Trump and they can't stop thanking him. You know, if Kamala Harris had won the last election, all of the J6 protesters that were pardoned by Trump, which we covered on a prior show, would still be rotting in prison. All of these pro-life protesters that we talked about earlier, age 78, early 80s, late 80s, would still be rotting in prison. And these 6 Americans released from communist Venezuela would still be rotting in prison. And you have prophecy teachers that come on their shows and they talk about how Donald Trump is an antichrist figure. No, that's not accurate at all. Donald Trump is not an antichrist figure. What is happening is not 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3, but 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 6 and 7, where the Lord is using this man to hold back the forces of the New World Order, an antichrist. Notice also this particular screenshot. It says President Trump is to sign an executive order to deport Hamas students on visas who break the law. Trump is ordering review to identify, punish, and deport anti-Semites, including those on student visas. he says, I would add to the list some of the local anti-Semites as well. So here are people coming into the United States on student visas that are organizing anti-America and anti-Israel protests on our campuses. And yet they're being privileged with a visa. They're being privileged to come into the United States of America and take part in our great universities. I mean, could I do that? Could I be admitted into some foreign country to be admitted as a student there, and then to use my time there to organize, in some cases, violent insurrections in the land of my host that gave me the privileges of entering their country? Of course I couldn't do that. But here in the United States of America, that's normal. And so Trump is reversing that. I mean, we want students to come into the United States to study, but if you're here and you have some kind of Hamas background, you're here for nefarious reasons. You're here to do harm and destruction. You're here to organize rallies and so forth against Israel and the United States, then your visa privileges are revoked. Look, I'm a very hospitable, generous person. I'll most likely let you come into my house for purposes of fellowship. But if you start spitting on the food that my wife made, and you start insulting my wife, and you start graffitiing my furniture and wallpaper, then guess what? My hospitality ends at that point. And you'll find yourself out of the house on your ear. And Donald Trump is doing the same thing here with the United States of America. The Biden regime was going the opposite direction. Now, this one's big here. It has to do with the fact that the Trump administration has now set its sights on the Department of Education. And notice this particular screenshot, picture of Jimmy Carter, who started the Department of Education. It says in 1979, Jimmy Carter started the Department of Education. Since then, the United States has gone from first to 24th in education. So when the Department of Education started, America was number one in terms of education, and now she is basically dead last. And at some point you have to ask yourself, has the Department of Education, federalizing education, done any good? And now Trump, through comments that he's made, is setting the crosshairs, so to speak, on the Department of Education. And that is such a major, healthy development. It's hard to put a finer point on it and to add more exclamation points after it than amen and amen. And I don't have a screenshot on this, but I want to recommend a book to you. It's by Paul Vitz, V-I-T-Z, a sociologist. He wrote this book back in 1986, and the title of it is Censorship, Evidence of Bias in Our Children's Textbooks, again written in 1986. And he documents in that particular book that the moment education became federalized and centralized through the creation of the Department of Education by Jimmy Carter, all of our Christian heritage, historical concepts found in our founding fathers and in their writings, any reference that our founding fathers made to the Bible in their speeches or writings or in their personal lives, any reference to the Judeo-Christian influence over our founding fathers, those historical accounts began to be edited and censored. And so now when your typical person goes to public school, particularly, with the Federal Department of Education having so much influence over national education, your typical person goes through a public school program and they have no idea that Christianity played any role whatsoever in the advent of the United States of America. Most people mistakenly think that our founding fathers were deists or Masons or those smitten by the Enlightenment. And when you actually study the information, and there's many good ministries that provide it, one of the very first books I read on it was the book by the late Tim LaHaye called The Faith of Our Founding Fathers. What you see is primary source evidence that Christianity played a massive role in the founding of this republic. In fact, if it wasn't for Christianity, this republic would have never gotten off the ground. And yet that whole educational perspective since the founding of the Department of Education has been omitted from public school curricula. And now getting rid of the Department of Education, which I hope and pray that the Trump administration makes good on, just get rid of it, abolish it. He told the person that he's got in there now, I want you to work yourself out of a job. In other words, let's just get rid of the whole thing. And once these people are out of here, these bureaucrats, let's fumigate the building because the whole thing stinks to high heaven. And once that transpires and takes place, education will return to where it rightfully belongs, in the hands of the states, the localities, and the parents who can send their kids into institutions and schools that can be informed about America's Christian heritage. So this whole mindset to get rid of the Department of Education is just another example of how God is using the Trump administration to restrain evil. There's other things that are going on. Notice this particular screenshot here. And this is from an article from Bitcoin Magazine. And it says, President Trump signs an executive order to ban central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, dated January the 23rd, 2025. It says this: today, United States President Donald Trump signed an executive order related to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency entitled Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology. This executive order banned the creation and the issuance of central bank digital currencies in the United States, defining a CBDC as a form of digital money or monetary value denominated in the national unit account that is a direct liability of the central bank. This particular article goes on and it concludes this way. Entitled Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology, the wide-ranging executive order explicitly says that CBDCs, quote, now listen to this very carefully, CBDCs, quote, threaten the stability of the financial system, individual privacy, now watch this, and the sovereignty of the United States. That is a blow to the New World Order. Now, I realize that the New World Order is going to come. I realize that the prophecies concerning the Antichrist running the New World Order are going to come to fruition. But what you're seeing happening right now in real time are forces at work via the restrainer delaying the decay, slowing down the progress of the New World Order, because the New World Order can't tolerate an independent and sovereign United States of America. And there's three things you need for an independent and sovereign United States of America. You need enforceable borders, a common language, a common culture, and a common currency. The CBDCs take away all that. They electronically digitize all transactions. And that's a massive step in the direction of the surveillance state, because this is how China has set up its social credit score system. The social credit score system relates to the fact that the Chinese government can monitor all of the transactions of its citizens. There's a paper trail electronically on every single one of them. And when they have buying behavior that goes outside the government narrative, whether it be what they read, what they purchase to read, what causes they support, what churches they go to, whether they're recycling or not, whatever the issue is, their opportunities in life shrink. You can't get the loan for your business. You can't, get your kids in the best schools. Your traveling privileges, passport privileges are restricted. You only get so much money for fuel for the car, which they want everybody in these electronic cars now, Teslas and so forth. And you're put literally into an electronic concentration camp. And the reason they're able to do that is because they moved away from currency and moved to digitized transactions. And we've been talking and warning a long time how that mindset is coming to the United States of America through these CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And here's Donald Trump with the stroke of a pen saying, no, these are a threat to our national sovereignty. That's not a pro-Antichrist move, folks. That's an anti-Antichrist move, if I can use that expression. And the work of the restrainer continues. Notice this particular screenshot here. It says the United States, quoting Trump, will withdraw from the UN Human Rights Council and halt funds to UNRWA. I mean, this is massive. The United Nations Human Rights Council is, to me, it's a running and a standing joke. Because the people on that council are some of the greatest human rights violators on planet Earth. Look at all of the rogue and thug nations that sit in judgment on other nations from their position on the United Nations Human Rights Council. And UNRWA, as we've documented in prior shows, is extremely anti-Israel and pro-Hamas at its core. And what's tragic is we pay for, 40% of the United Nations budget to a globalist entity that does nothing but abuse us. I mean, that's like propping up somebody that every day at 3 o'clock hits you in the face. I mean, why would you continue to subsidize or prop up that person? Yet that's what we're doing with the United Nations. And here's Trump saying we're being ripped off. And consequently, he has announced our withdrawal from the UN Human Rights Council, and he has announced halting all funds to UNRWA. One other thing real quick here on this work of the restrainer. This particular article comes from Pravda.com, January the 31st, 2025. And this is what it says. The U.S. president has warned that the economic bloc not to undermine, an economic bloc not to underline the mighty U.S. dollar. And what he's talking about is BRICS. The acronym BRICS consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And also involved in BRICS is, I believe, Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and a few other nations. And this is a collection of nations that have come together to produce their own global currency with the intention of tanking the United States dollar. And if you're wondering why things keep getting more and more expensive here in the United States, it's because the power of the dollar is being weakened. And one of the reasons it's being weakened is because BRICS is moving us in the direction of a new global currency. And Trump is basically saying to BRICS, if you keep that up, every nation that's doing that, we're going to slap a tariff on them, and you're not going to be able to do business freely as you once did in the United States of America. The more you move in this direction of creating another currency that has the goal of eclipsing the dollar. And so what Trump is doing here is making national moves, not just talk, but national moves to fulfill his promise of making America great again. Notice what this particular article says. It says the U.S. president has warned the economic bloc not to undermine the mighty U.S. dollar. The BRICS nations will face 100% tariffs on their goods if they dare to challenge the mighty U.S. dollar, President Trump warned on Thursday, in yet another threat to use American power to achieve geopolitical goals. The idea that BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over, Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform on Thursday, echoing past threats. They can go find another sucker nation, he fumed. We are going to require a commitment from these seemingly hostile countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty U.S. dollar. There is no chance that BRICS will replace the U.S. dollar in international trade or anywhere else, and any country that tries to do so will say hello to tariffs and goodbye to America, Trump added. India stated that while the group discusses bilateral financial transactions, it has no interest in weakening the dollar. India has never been involved in de-dollarization, the Foreign Minister of India said in December. South Africa similarly denied the bloc was planning to create a new currency. New global currency to replace the dollar? What global currency? We would never think of such a thing. When in reality, we know that they have been plotting such a thing. So what has stopped them from doing it? What Trump has threatened them with. Now, what other president acts this way and does this way by putting America first and does things to protect the dollar? Very few presidents, Republican or Democrat, do this, and yet God has given us this reprieve. God has given us a very strong measure of grace. And the Holy Spirit, I believe, via the restrainer, is at work in many of these decisions, holding back the influence and the power of the Antichrist. The Antichrist will come. A postponement is not a cancellation, but his coming has been delayed. Denied? No. Delayed? Yes. Which is what God said he would do on the eve of the rapture, and you're watching the whole thing happen in real time. Now, does this mean that I think the Trump administration is perfect? No, I don't. Because there are some issues that have come up recently related to Stargate, which I don't have time to go into now. I'll make you aware of on our next broadcast. But now, most likely would be the best time to end this particular broadcast, where we've dealt with breaking news concerning the Gaza Strip and how that potentially fits into Bible prophecy. And I've also made you aware of the work of the restrainer that is happening now in real time. Let me give you a couple of infomercials in closing, just because these are time sensitive. I want to remind you of the Sugarland Bible Church Prophecy Conference, which is coming right up February 21st through 23rd. The Friday is the banquet at nearby Sugar Creek Country Club. Then you have the all-day conference. Then the conference essentially ends, but we invite people to come to church during our regular schedule on the 23rd of February to participate and enjoy, since our speakers at the conference will be presenting during our normal service times at Sugarland Bible Church. The conference is a Faith for Final Days event featuring Bill Federer, Olivier Melnick, Randall Price, and myself. Special music by Claude and Rebecca Chu and Olam Worship. And you can go to the Sugarland Bible Church website and you can see the conference schedule there. Because of spatial constraints, we now are at the point of being sold out. Not just for the conference on Saturday, but for the banquet on Friday. But if you want, I would encourage you to go ahead and sign up, because as we are this close to the conference, people cancel all the time. and we would love to get you on the waiting list. And even if you don't come actually into the building, the whole thing, not Friday, but all day Saturday, ending with a Q&A session on Saturday amongst the various speakers. And then, of course, our normal service times on Sunday is going to be live streamed. And you can catch that live stream on the Sugarland Bible Church website. You can catch that live stream on the Sugarland Bible Church Facebook page. You can also catch the live stream on the Andy Woods Ministries Facebook page, app, and website. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of that, and you can participate in the conference remotely. One other conference that's coming up real quick that I want to make you aware of is the Grace and Truth Bible Church Conference in Georgia, coming up February 14th through 16th, 2025. It's a conference dealing with God's plan and Satan's attack on the divine institutions. As we switch the slides, you can kind of see the conference schedule, and you can get a glimpse there of the various presentations and conference speakers that will be there. I'll be one of the presenters amongst other very good presenters dealing with that very important topic of divine institutions. So I'd love to see you, those of you in the Georgia area. February 14th through 16th at the Grace and Truth Bible Church Conference on God's plan and Satan's attack on the divine institutions. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here, and we will pick it up with Mark of the Beast technology in our next installment. Thank you for watching Pastor's Point of View. Thank you for listening to Pastor's Point of View, and we'll see you next time, Lord willing.